Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today's Modernizing SOC operations. I'm going to hand it over to Jeremy.
Hey there, everyone. So I'm Jeremy Rolader. I am on our directors team for security services. I specifically run our SOC services. I've started in the SOC as a SOC analyst. I worked during college on second shift, and then I kind of moved up the ranks where I was more of an administrative role. So I did stuff like log source onboarding, quality control of those log sources. Helped with detection engineering and developing SOAR use cases within the SIM platforms. And so now I am on the directors team, and today I'm going to be speaking to modernizing SOC operations and how we advance our operations from reactive to proactive. And so I wanted to start with kind of going over what a traditional SOC looks like. Obviously, this is very high level kind of overview, and everyone's at different levels of maturity within their security program. But typically, you're bringing in your data sources into a SIM platform where you're essentially collecting those. You're going to have some long-term storage within your SIM platform for compliance and regulation reasons. And so your SIM platform is where you're going to essentially collect this data. It's allowing you to do correlation between multiple data sources for investigation and detection purposes. At minimum, for detection, they usually have set up. And so your level one analyst is going to be eyes on glass within your SIM platform. This is where they're gonna essentially manage those detections. And then they're going to do the investigation and triage of those incidents, make the determination if it needs to be escalated or not. Typically, customers will just use the case manager within the SIM platform itself, but some people use stuff like ServiceNow or Jira. And then your level two analyst is going to pick up that incident. And so where we're seeing a lot of organizations struggle right now is at a level two analyst, there's not enough context within your SIM platform, whether it's because you can't ingest certain logs into your SIM platform for budget reasons, or the actual depth of the information from those logs is not enough to perform remediation and containment activity from the SIM platform. So they're having to do that in-depth investigation inside of your security tools. And so you're finding an area where you're having to pivot from tool to tool to start to finish these incidents. And example of this is, say, your EDR platform. You get a lot more context when you pivot into your EDR platform, whether that's for process trees. And so these level two analysts are having to pivot from tool to tool to do that remediation and containment to resolve these incidents. And so what you see is a lot of manual workflows. We lack the amount of automation that we have in a traditional SOC, whether that's because you don't have the resources to build those SOAR workflows, or you don't have the product to support that. This is obviously resulting in manual processes, which slow investigation and response times. And so what we aim to do is shape our onboard tools and processes that will represent a more modern security operations center. And I'll kind of talk about how to do that today. And so we're going to start with the foundation of a SOC. Obviously, if you don't have the very foundation of having those logs ingested into your security operations center, then you won't have the ability to detect off of specific activity, or you're very limited at the least. And so what we've been seeing organizations do is have some type of data pipeline management within their organization. And a huge benefit is obviously cost optimization. And so you can dual stream your data from your data pipeline management tool to offboard the storage for long-term retention. Obviously, a lot of these SIM platforms are now on the cloud, and storing this data for longer periods of time is very expensive. And so we're seeing a lot of customers reduce the budget of the license and allow that storage to be offboarded to another long-term kind of cold storage. And then within their SIM platform, they're only going to keep that data for 30 to 90 days for security relevant data. And a huge use case I've actually been having a lot of conversations with organizations is anytime you're thinking about moving to a new SIM platform, you should take into consideration of how you are retaining that long-term storage that you require for auditing purposes when you decommission the SIM platform. So a lot of the times you're not able to simply export and import this into your new SIM platform. And so you're either going to have some type of data pipeline management where you're storing that data off the SIM platform, or you are running multiple SIM platforms together, and obviously that's not very budget friendly. And so other ways we're seeing data pipeline management used is with the improved data quality. And so if you have any data that has to be anonymized or redacted before it's sent to the SIM platform, that can be done within your SIM or your data pipeline management tool. So any PCI or PII customer information that isn't relevant to security investigations, then that can be kind of sent to your storage for auditing purposes, but not sent to your SIM platform. Other ways we're seeing data pipeline management be used is actually adding context to users or hosts or IOCs before it's sent to your SIM platform. And so your level one analyst is now not having to do these manual workflows where they're pivoting to your identity tool to look up user information. They're pivoting to your EDR tool to look up asset information. And this is all provided within the logs in the SIM platform itself. And so you're really you're streamlining the investigation flow of your analysts. And so and then another way is if you have security data that has these fields that might not be relevant to security, you can cut those fields before they're ingested into your SIM platform and reduce on ingestion there as well. So that's kind of how we're seeing data pipeline management put into the market right now and the conversations we're having around data pipeline management. And next, we're going to move on to how we're detecting off these logs that we're building, bringing into the platform now. And so user identity behavior and analytics is not anything new within security operations, but I will say I think it's evolved a ton within the past 3 years that I've been working with UEBA platforms. One huge way that they've evolved is a lot of these SIM vendors are now putting these UEBA capabilities within the platform themselves. And so it's not a separate tool that your analysts have to monitor. You're having a single pane of glass where your analysts can monitor detections. And obviously, if you're not aware of what UEBA is, it's when you're taking baselines of what is normal in a environment. So say you have a two-week baseline of what's normal for users and entities, and then anything that deviates from that normal behavior, you're going to trigger off of. And so you get a lot of use cases that weren't possible with correlation rules or were very difficult to say the least. Stuff like data exfiltration, because a lot of the times you may not have huge amounts of data going out. And so at what point do you create that threshold for a correlation rule to trigger off of data exfiltration? And so this is a really nice use case where anytime a user has a increased amount of kind of data sent outbound, then it will detect that. And so insider threats, very relevant kind of security threat. So I think we're seeing insider threats be increased, especially with the AI conversations that are happening right now, and your users putting maybe confidential information into these chatbots. And so UEBA is a great way to build your program around insider threats. Other ways we're seeing the evolution of detections is obviously with threat intelligence. And so whether it's a threat intelligence platform that you own or it's just threat feeds that you're ingesting into your platform, how are you detecting off relevant threat intelligence or IOCs that are coming into your environment and being observed within your environment. And so we're seeing threat feeds from either open source or your threat intelligence platform being brought into the SIM platform, and you can detect it, and you can even create these workflows where you have automation around threat intelligence, where if a IOC is known malicious and it has a high confidence score, then you can do some automation workflows where it's being blocked on your firewall automatically. And then a lot of organizations and SIMs are now mapping their detections to MITRE framework. This is a great way to get an overview of what your kind of coverage is when it comes to techniques and tactics that are relevant to your organization. And so being able to get a high overview of where you guys are covered and where you guys aren't covered, it really helps you build a maturity program on where to focus on when it comes to detection engineering or threat hunting in general. And it obviously helps with investigation workflows as well. If you have a technique and that a adversary is likely to use, it will help you with next steps of like investigating a specific incident. And so it really just helps the maturity of your platform in general. And so with that comes a lot of false positives, especially with UEBA. I think that's where we've seen a lot of customers and organizations struggle with UEBA is there's a ton of false positives that come from it. And so one way that we've been seeing organizations combat this is have some type of risk scoring strategy. So maybe these low fidelity alerts have some type of risk score that is like 5 points instead of 20 points, and it will build the risk score of these users and entities to have you more specifically prioritize certain activity within your environment. And so with that, obviously we want to be very efficient and optimize how we're investigating and responding to these incidents. And with that, we've been seeing SOAR be implemented. SOAR, a lot of organizations have struggled with SOAR because you need a whole resource that is specifically building these playbooks within your environment to efficiently run a SOAR initiative. And so having that resource that's full-time, obviously there's budget restraints with these organizations, and these teams are getting smaller and smaller. And so SOAR has been very difficult to implement within security operations for organizations, but I would really I'd really say that you should start with these small use cases, stuff like doing automating repetitive tier 1 and tier 2 tasks. So enriching IOCs as they trigger alerts within alerts and cases. That can be done with very simple automation. A lot of these SIM platforms have these kind of playbooks built within their marketplaces that you can automatically enable with just the use of a API integration. And so all these tier 1 and tier 2 tasks of enrichment and contextualization for your analyst to pick up that incident and have that already is huge, and it will reduce the mean time to investigate for your SOC. And so the other way we're seeing the investigation and response workflows become more efficient is with generative AI. And so typical SIMs all the kind of front runners for the SIM platforms now have some type of generative AI implemented into your platform. And so where we're seeing it be used mostly right now is when an alert triggers or a case triggers, it's going to now summarize that and give your analyst a summarization of what occurred in the detection to trigger that alert, and even next steps of what to investigate, the entities that were involved. So your analyst now doesn't have to spend this time to triage what occurred, and they can put more focus into the in-depth investigation and surrounding activity of that incident. Other ways we're seeing Gen AI be used is absolutely with chatbots. So you can ask a chatbot to help you build queries or detections. And while it might not get you those complex detections or complex playbooks built, we're seeing it get you 50% of the way. And so this obviously maybe you were only able to build 3 playbooks a day, and now you can build, say, 6 playbooks because it's getting those playbooks around 50 to 60% of the done, and you just have to do the final touches on it. Other ways we're seeing it is obviously with natural language querying. And so a lot of these SIM platforms rely on you knowing how to query their searches. And so at a tier 1 level, we have a ton of turnover. So these analysts are less experienced and may not have the capabilities or knowledge on how to run these queries. And so natural language query obviously streamlines and allows these analysts to focus on the investigation instead of learning these query languages. I would still recommend at a tier 2 level, your analyst should know how to query and build out these complex queries. But at a level 1 analyst, natural language query really works pretty well, allowing you to make that kind of false positive filtering that a tier 1 analyst does. And so where we're seeing the kind of AI move and shift is using agentic AI. And so this is more semi-autonomous, where not only you have a AI that is doing the summarization of these incidents, but now it's going to perform actual investigations on your behalf. And so it can use context from run books to kind of be adaptive and look for certain context to perform different investigations. And it's going to allow you to just have a whole incident and have around 70 to 80% of a tier 1 analyst's job automated, where it's able to do that investigation. It's able to follow a run book of what a tier 1 analyst would typically do, and it can even provide remediation on your behalf. Where we're seeing organizations kind of limit this is they're not allowing the remediation step. Currently, it's more of a prompt that will allow you to take action when at a tier 2 level. So it just builds that investigation for you and it gives you next steps. And so what we're actually kind of working towards is maybe you don't have your current detection use cases ran by agentic AI, but maybe now you have all these low fidelity alerts, a lot of these alerts that maybe spammed your environment too much to actually enable and implement into your environment. And now you have agentic AI actually performing investigation and making those determination of those low fidelity alerts. And so now you have a larger threat landscape, detection landscape that you are covering within your organization. And so how do we shift from these reactive approaches of security operations where we're having a detection trigger and we're responding to that? And how do we be more proactive where not only are we doing threat hunting to identify undetected activity through your threat hunts, but you're building detections now with your threat hunts, and you're enabling your detection engineering from these threat hunts, but you're retroactively looking within your environment for any threats that went undetected. You're using threat intelligence to correlate our IOCs and TTPs across your environment. You're using purple teaming to validate detections through red and blue collaboration. And so this allows you to know a detection is not working before your breach occurs. Obviously, with data sources changing rapidly and parsers changing rapidly, you always want to be testing your detection landscape and understanding that your detection, or being confident in your detections before the breach occurs. Additionally, we're seeing this continuous detection and response kind of pipeline where you're continuously tuning and validating your logic based off the detection findings. And then attack surface management and configuration management is how we're going to detect misconfigurations within your environment. A lot of these tools allow you to connect via API to your tool set and understand where you are not implementing best practices and where you can now get recommendations on not only where you do not have best practices implemented, but why you're vulnerable because of this configuration and how to actually implement that change. And so we're seeing a lot of these tools come up in the market where you can just connect via API and you can get those best practice configurations to remediate any misconfigurations in real time. Yeah, I kind of realized that I went a little bit fast, but that's the kind of what I had to talk about today. Um, I think the big conversations is just how we're being more efficient with the ingestion of logs into our environment, how we're expanding our detection landscape, and how we are then proactively responding and being proactive within our security operations rather than all reactive. And I guess I'll leave some time for any Q&A. Did anyone have any questions that we want to cover?
Doesn't look like there's any questions currently. If you have any questions, put them in the chat. We'll wait a minute more. Doesn't look like there's any questions for today. Thank you guys so much for attending. We'll be sending out the recording and the slides here as soon as they become available. And thank you guys so much again for attending and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.